Hey guys, it's Jeremy. We're back with another video for the Life by the Square Inch. This is actually going to be the first true video that I'm going to be doing outside of the 30-day challenge that I've been working on and the live plays that I have otherwise on the channel. This is going to be the first of my videos where I'm really kind of sitting down and talking about RPGs or kind of showing the crafting that I do typically with a lot of my games. In particular, I'm going to be talking and showing how to make magic item cards. Magic item cards are something that is definitely an optional thing. You don't have to do this for your table, but it's something that I really enjoy doing. And for me, magic items are an integral part of a fantasy setting. They don't have to be a part of the game, but they make it so much more interesting. And in particular, the kinds of magic items where you get a physical card. I'm not talking about a +1 sword or a potion of healing or things like that. That would be a little bit extreme to make some of these for those types of items. But the ones that you really want to have an impact with your group, the ones where you really want to see the players' faces light up whenever you hand it to them. These are the kinds of items that I think qualify for making cards. Having a physical card, I've found at least, it's visceral. You have something in your hand and you can point it at the bad guy menacingly. Even if you're actually pointing a card at the DM, it still feels like you've got a powerful sword in your hand. You know, if you're wondering how to describe, using the magic item, having the card in your hand with the description right in front of you, the artwork, especially if it's compelling artwork, it's just such a great thing to have at your fingertips. And that's why I think it's really worth making these for the items that are a little bit more important. And plus, truth be told, it's not difficult to make these things. It takes just a little bit of work, and it's not expensive. Once you get the initial setup, at least, we'll go into the supplies and things of that nature. It's really cheap and easy. So it'll step your game up. Your players will love them, and it makes you feel better to hand them out. So stick right here. We're going to talk about how to make magic item cards. So now that we've gone over the why that you might do this, now we're going to go over the how. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is supplies, the kinds of things that you're going to need to get to do this project. Some of them might be a little bit cost prohibitive, at least in the beginning, but they're really not that expensive, and truthfully, they'll pay for themselves over the course of doing this several times. The first of which is completely free, and this is art. It's really easy to find a lot of great art online. You can check things like artifacts from Magic the Gathering, images from the Dungeons & Dragons games in its various editions, Pathfinder, certain third-party companies, artists on sites like DeviantArt or ArtStation. They post this kind of stuff all the time, and you can find high-resolution color images that are really easy to get. Now, this brings up a very important question of ethics. A lot of people really have a problem with doing this kind of thing, with going online and getting artwork for personal use. Here's how I kind of feel about it. As long as you're not using it for profit and you're not passing off this work as your own, I don't really see the harm in making this kind of stuff for your table and your personal games. Ultimately, it's a decision that you have to kind of weigh for yourself and make a decision. All of that being said, wherever it is that you might be able to get your artwork from, one of the things that you'll have to do with it is resize it. The ratio that I have found that works really, really well is 3.5 by 5. And we'll get into kind of printing and how you do all of that and stuff. So just kind of keep that in mind whenever you're looking for images. That kind of ratio is really nice. A slight rectangle, not quite square. Printing is another kind of thing. You can find places that will print these things for you, Walmart, other kinds of print stores, and some of them really won't do copyrighted material, so it could be an issue. Once again, it might be an ethical matter. this is something you should make a decision on for yourself. This is the page of images that I ended up coming up with that I'm going to be using this for this project. So you can see I fit 4 of them on a page, and they look quite nice. So I'm really excited about getting to those, but we'll do that in just a moment. The second item that I want to discuss about supplies, as far as supplies go at least, is a glue stick. This is an optional thing, but I have found that it's really easy for them to, the front and the back, so like the image and the description, to slide around and shift whenever you're trying to get them together to laminate them. A little bit of glue stick on one side sticks together, and it holds them very, very nicely. So the big cost item for this project is a laminator. We do homeschooling, so we have a laminator here in the house, so it was a really easy thing for me to decide to use. They're not that expensive. I think you can get one for about $30. Again, Walmart, Hobby Lobby, places like that should carry them. They're not too expensive, and they're nice to have around for various projects. The sheets for the laminators are like about $8 for a pack of 20, but whenever you consider that you're getting 4 cards out of each sheet, the price tends to go down quite a bit. I think whenever these are all said and done, the cards come out to about a quarter a piece, maybe 30 cents a piece. So it's really not that bad. The next item is a paper cutter. This can be expensive, 20, 30 bucks for a small one. Once again, we have one in the house here, and they're not bad, things to have around. Failing getting a paper cutter, you can just use a pair of scissors. You'll need a pair of scissors for the last step of all of this anyways, whenever you're kind of trimming them up. So if you're cool with doing scissors, then go for it. Paper is an obvious kind of thing. You'll need paper to kind of print this stuff out on. If you're not having it done by a printer, you'll have to print it yourself. So you'll have to have a printer as well. And it definitely helps to have a printer around for the second part, the description and history of the item. So that covers the supplies of the project. And next we're going to get into actually the design of the project. Hey, down here now. So now that we have all of that discussed, it's time to kind of get into the design of the card themselves. I've got myself shrunk down here into this little box so that we can actually bring up the pictures of the items kind of over here on the side and take a look at them while we're going through the discussion. First of all, what I wanted to talk about is getting inspiration from the images themselves. Now, most of the time, when you find an image, like we talked about earlier, that just talks to you, it just says something to you, and you really, really like it, your ideas should already start coming, probably faster than you can really keep up with, honestly. Just jot down notes, take down ideas. It was actually very, very difficult for me to take these 4 images and save them and not come up with anything yet. But I did it on purpose so that I can try to come up with things here on the video live while I'm recording this. This may take me a little bit of time to chew through, but hopefully we can kind of do it together. And you guys can keep up and kind of see the thought process that usually goes through my head, at least, whenever we do this. Now, not only is inspiration important from the artwork itself, you also want to take into some consideration your party, their level, possibly some of their classes, things like that, and as well as like the setting that your game is taking place in. Magic items are a really good place to kind of drive the flavor of your setting. So if it's based on a certain culture, or if there's a certain way that magic works, or if only certain kinds of people use axes, all of that kind of stuff is something that you should be considering whenever you're designing these magic items. But also something that is important is to know the mechanics of the system that you're using. Because really what magic items do are they give your players, your player characters, a way to bend or break the established rules in the same way that racial or class features do in 5th edition, or feats. Magic items are kind of the same way. They allow them to do something that they wouldn't normally be able to do, or to do something that they can already do but better. So it's a really good idea to know the mechanics of the system that you're running. Now, typically I run 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. That's what my mind tends to kind of think in. That's what I'm the most comfortable with as far as the mechanics go. So today, that's what we're going to be using for the design of our magic items. They will be for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons use, regardless of whatever setting that may be. So one of the other things whenever you think about kind of writing your descriptions is not just what it's going to facilitate in the game. Try to think of a history, like where the item might have been, where it came from, who made it originally, who could have had possession of it before it comes into the hands of the party. And personally, I also tend to avoid designing magic items that are specifically for a certain character. There's nothing wrong with doing that. That's just a personal preference. I like giving an item to the party and letting them decide where it best fits within the collection of player characters. So I think we're about ready to get started on actually doing the design for these 4 items. So let's dive in, shall we? First up is this really awesome picture of a vial that I found. Now, what I'm going to do, I think, instead of actually writing out the descriptions here on camera, is I'm actually just going to take down a series of notes, and then I'm going to kind of go away, write those descriptions down, and then come back and move on to the next stage of this project. So for this vial, the first thing that jumps into my mind is the fact that there's a severed hand that is clutching it. To me, that very much says necromantic magic. So I'm going to write down necromantic. There's definitely that's supported by, the skull in the background, as well as, you can see the drawing of certain roots. It very much kind of looks like a ritual book or a spell book or something of that nature. And I could definitely see that as being something for necromancy. So all of that considered, it definitely looks like it would be usable by some kind of spellcaster. So we're definitely going to hone in on spellcaster mechanics, something that would be beneficial for a spellcaster versus a melee fighter type. The energy that's glowing inside of there is kind of a pale blue, maybe somewhat purplish. So despite the fact that this looks very necromantic and dangerous, some of that energy actually looks like it could be holy somehow. So maybe some kind of spirit energy or soul type magic. And I also like the fact that the hand is grasping this vial, and it's doing so in a very unnatural, very uncomfortable looking way. So I think there would be something really cool to do with grasping, something about grabbing a hold of, and I'm going to put quotations around that, grasping with quotes. And I really like the idea that this might actually be a severed hand, that it's not really just a carving of one or something, but this is actually somebody's severed hand. So we're going to put that down, and I'm going to put severed hand who ? Because that could be a really important part in the description. It could also be a lot of fun to add that flavor in. Obviously, whenever you're considering magic items, another thing to talk about is the slot that it's going to take up on your player character. So this obviously would be some kind of necklace or amulet. So this is going to take up the next slot, and I'm going to put amulet. Could also help whenever you go to name this thing. Cool. Okay, so I've got necromantic magic, spellcaster type features, spirit or soul energy of some kind, grasping, severed hand, whose, and amulet written down as the notes for this one. So I think we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. This next one is a really cool looking hammer that I found. And yeah, it's just a cool looking thing. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to come up with stuff for. So obviously, first and foremost, it's got an elephant's head. And an elephant conjures up all kinds of potential ideas. You've got things like charging, stampeding. You've got tusks. Something interesting about elephants, I don't know if we can necessarily work it into the item, but maybe, is that supposedly elephants never forget, the saying. So there could always be something clever to work in with that. Never forget. Okay. Now, the trunk is kind of wrapped around the haft of this hammer, which is really neat. And it's got a broken tusk. It definitely doesn't look like it was always broken. It looks like it was designed with the tusk intact originally. So I think that's something that would be interesting to note. Broken tusk, that could be a part of the item's history, possibly. Let's see. It definitely looks like it's made out of stone. So, and it's some kind of gold inlay or decoration around it. So we're going to go with a stone hammer. And let's see what else. I definitely get the idea that this could be maybe even a druid type weapon. Not necessarily. Druids aren't usually the big damage type dealers, but it is a stone weapon, so it could fall within their parameters of being able to use. However, it is martial, and I don't think that they typically are proficient with such a weapon. But it's an idea to write down. I'm going to put a question mark with it, just in case, just for consideration. Okay, so I've got elephant written down, and then underneath that I have charging, stampede, tusks, never forget. I also have broken tusk, stone hammer, and druid question mark written down. So I think that's probably enough for this item, and we're ready to move on to the next. The next is this mask. Now, I modified the image of this mask quite a bit because it had several different variations, different ways of positioning the scarf and things drawn with it, that I really wanted to include all of that on the image. So I just went into GIMP and I moved things around and I kind of ghosted out the other images to kind of put on the side there. So that way there was still one very prominent, lengthy version of the mask shown. So I wanted to definitely touch on the fact that there is like a weeping kind of motif to this mask. So I'm going to put weeping / somber, because not only are there these tears that are kind of streaming down the cheeks of this mask, but it's also the lady that kind of is reclined on the top. She looks like she could be sobbing or crying in her lament. So I'm also going to write down the word lament, if I can figure out how to spell it on the fly. Lament. A lamenting lady. I'm actually just going to write that whole phrase down because that could be something kind of cool. Obviously, this mask would be made out of something very, very opulent. It definitely looks like it could be marble or porcelain, something like that, with gold kind of decorations and inlay. And this cloth hangs pretty heavily, almost like a silk. So I would definitely think that this would be an expensive item, not necessarily just because of the potential magic that it might have, but I see this as being maybe a noble or a bard, perhaps some kind of performer. So I'm going to write down noble / bard. So let's see what else we could take from it. The fact that this is specifically meant to kind of be versatile as far as like how much of the mouth you can cover, how you can drape these things. I kind of like the idea that it serves a bunch of different functions so that the person doesn't just wear this on an occasion. Like they probably keep this on quite a bit, most of the time. So maybe even require attunement. So that way it kind of encourages the player to always have it on, and a good player will take that opportunity to make sure that they role play the fact that their character has this mask on all of the time. So require attunement. Let's see what else. That's probably about it as far as I can think of for this mask. I'm also going to write down opulent, just in case it conjures anything up later on. So far for this mask, the notes that I have are weeping/somber, lamenting lady, noble/bard, require attunement, and opulent/rich. I'm also going to write down something about the reclining woman. See if just, again, anything can be jogged later on. Reclining woman. The more kind of bullet points like this that you tend to write down, the more you can kind of let your brain spider out away from it later on. So that's what we've got for the mask. The last and final item that I have is this belt. So this belt definitely has some kind of lion motif. Lions themselves conjure up all kinds of thoughts: pride, strength, hunter, stalker. It's also got these signs of the omega, and then I'm not sure what the other symbol is, but you can always look that up. That's the kind of thing. Wikipedia is really helpful with this kind of stuff. You can go find out what the little symbology and all of the different iconography and things on an item might be, and see if you want to work that into your description and the abilities that it has. So I'm going to write down omega and a question mark so that I can look up what that other symbol means and see if iota? I don't know. Try to see if I can't come up with something to do with that later on. One of the things that I also notice immediately is that the focal point of this belt is certainly the lion's head, but its mouth is open. And there's something going on with the interior of his mouth. So I'm going to make a specific notation about roar/thunder, because it definitely looks like something could come from that little circle there in the middle. And I wrote down roar and thunder, and I'm also going to write down mouth and underline it. In addition, he's also got that jewel kind of in the center of his forehead. It reminds me very much of the third eye kind of concept of certain belief structures. So I'm going to write down third eye, and it seems to be like a gemstone. I don't typically use psionics in a lot of the game settings that I run, but it could be a consideration for a one-off item, or perhaps any of you out there that really like psionics. So I'm going to go ahead and write down psionics as well. It definitely has gold to it. This is a big, thick belt. So I very much kind of see this as being much more based around a warrior. It's just a big, sturdy looking piece of gear. So I'm going to write down fighter type. Okay, so that covers it for this item as well. So the belt, I wrote down lion, and underneath lion I have pride, strength, hunter, stalker. I also wrote down omega and question mark for whichever that other symbol is there. I also wrote down roar/thunder. I wrote down mouth and underlined it because I really want to focus the power around his mouth being open there. Third eye, psionics, and fighter type. So that covers these 4 items as far as the ideas that really just sprang to mind when I'm sitting here looking at them. Like I said, I'm going to go and write these up and then I'll be back. But I did want to also say that these 4 images I did find online, and I am going to be putting the links to the pages where you can find this artwork, crediting the artists, in the description of this video down below. So make sure that you go check out their websites, and yeah, you can see where this kind of stuff comes from. So stick around, and we'll get to actually making the cards. Okay, so I'm back. And I'm going to kind of go over what I ended up coming up with for these items. So for the vial, I ended up coming up with the name Death Grip. It is difficult to decipher just how long this severed hand has been rotting. But no matter what you try, it seems impossible to separate the glowing vial from its grasp. You can feel the coldness of this relic just by being near it. You think you may even hear whispered moans. Rumor has it that this hand once belonged to a necromancer that challenged the current Reaper of Souls for his position. No one is sure if he failed or if he succeeded with a price. A little bit of a typo there. As far as the mechanics go, when the wearer of this amulet kills a creature with a spell, other than constructs or undead, this device absorbs a fraction of its soul. This is represented by a number of points equal to twice the spell's level. The wearer may later then choose to spend these points, adding them as bonus necrotic damage to an attack spell that targets a single creature. That target has its hit point maximum reduced by an amount equal to this bonus damage. That's the first one. The second one is the mask, which I titled the Lamenting Lady. This surprisingly thin mask is made from pure white marble, including the figurine that adorns the top. Gold trappings give the piece an added level of opulence, including the trickling streams of golden tears that never seem to stop running down the mask's cheeks. The brilliant red draped silk scarf is said to have been dyed in the blood of a lover who was murdered most foul. The woman whose face this mask is based upon never recovered from her loss, eventually succumbing to her grief. Mechanics-wise, this mask requires attunement and grants a +1 to charisma. At any time, the wearer of this mask may use a bonus action to openly weep, taking 1 level of exhaustion. For the next minute, the wearer has a pool of healing power equal to the level of exhaustion just reached times 10. As an action, the wearer can touch a creature and dispense any number of hit points from this pool, up to the maximum amount remaining in the pool. The third item was the Warhammer, which I called the Mastodon of Stone, made it a Warhammer +2. This stout Warhammer is made of cracked gray stone, adorned with angular gold accents. The head of the weapon is made into the visage of an elephant, complete with ivory tusks, one of which appears to be broken. A thick red cord is wound around the haft, giving plenty of room for 2 hands on this heavy bludgeoner. Once a paragon of dwarven craftsmanship, even considerable age has done little to compromise the hammer's integrity. This hammer functions as a magical weapon, granting a +2 on both its attack and damage rolls. If a successful 2-handed attack is landed with this Warhammer, the target must succeed on a DC of 14 strength saving throw or be pushed back at least 10 feet. If this causes the target to slam into another creature of its size or smaller, then that target must also succeed on a strength saving throw at the same DC. On a failed save, this second target takes the same damage of the original attack, and both targets are pushed back an additional 10 feet. On a successful save, the second creature takes only half damage, and neither creature moves any further. This effect continues through however many targets it may be, so long as these conditions are met. And the last item is the belt, which I call the Roar of Altavian. This broad leather belt is incredibly heavy and is intricately decorated in silver and gold. A prominent lion's head forms the front of this garment. Its jaws opened wide to bare its fangs. Altavian was once the most famous gladiator in Daventshire. Some say that he believed he was possessed by the spirit of a dire lion. Many who questioned this and witnessed him fight reported a removal of any doubts of this being true. Mechanically, if the wearer of this belt moves at least 20 feet straight toward a target right before hitting it with a melee attack, the target must succeed on a strength saving throw. The DC is equal to 8 plus their strength modifier plus the proficiency bonus, or be knocked prone. If the target is prone, the wearer can take a bonus action to make an additional melee attack against that target. In addition, once per long rest, if the wearer is attuned to this belt, they may cast the Thunder Wave spell with the following change. The sound is that of a roar instead of thunder, and the area of effect becomes a 15-foot cone emanating from the mouth of the lion's head. So now we have our 4 items designed and ready to go. What comes next is to print these out and attach them to our pictures, and then we're going to laminate them. This is a tricky part of this, and this is not something that I have figured out a great way to do yet. What I do is I actually take a screen capture of the Word document and actually print these out as pictures so that I can get 4 of them per page in the same kind of dimensions that I have for the images. I'm sure there's a better way of doing that, probably involving PDFs or something of that nature, but I just haven't figured out how to do it yet. So now we're going to go to actually making the physical cards. So here we are, and you can see that I'm going ahead and using a little bit of a fast forward here. I've got the paper cutter out, and I'm just trimming up the white spaces off of these cards. One of the reasons that I go ahead and make them 3.5 by 5 is for uniformity. So that way, whenever you've got a bunch of these magic items on the table, they all kind of fit together. They're easy to stack. The one that I'm cutting now has a white background, so I'm using one of the other cards to kind of make sure that the dimensions end up the same. And now I'm kind of doing the same thing with the descriptions. These will be the backs of these magic item cards, so I'm kind of making sure that the dimensions are going to be the same as well, because these have a lot of space on the tops and the bottoms. Now, one of the things that I notice whenever I print these out is that you have to cut them pretty close horizontally here. Sometimes they end up with a little more extra room, but these in particular ended up pretty tight. So I'm trimming out a lot of the extra footage here just to kind of get the idea across of what you're doing. So I'm using a glue stick here, and I'm just literally just gluing the picture to the descriptions here, and making sure that they line up so that when you flip the card over, it's really easy to see the orientation and it makes sense. Now here I'm just feeding the things through the laminator, and honestly it kind of does all the rest of the work. Once you finish getting this run through the laminator, next you just really grab your pair of scissors, even if they're left-handed pair of scissors like the ones that I had to get. My wife is a lefty, so the rest is really just kind of trimming them up. One of the things that I do is, as you can see here, I trim up the corners, and then that's pretty much it. You're all set. And there we have it. It's as simple as that. We now have 4 magic items that you can distribute at your table, give to your party, and they look good. They're durable. You can spill drinks on them. You can, have pizza grease and everything else, and they're going to last pretty much forever. So you saw how it was done. It's really not all that difficult. It's really not expensive, and it adds so much to your games. So I've been Jeremy. This is another video for Life by the Square Inch. If you see what you like, if you like what you see even, hit the like button, leave a comment below, maybe even drop a subscription for the channel here, the Erasmus Expeditions. And until next time, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.